The merciless Texas sun blazed through the splintered doorway of the weathered cabin, casting jagged shadows across the grime-encrusted floorboards, where 12-year-old Emma Grace knelt in complete despair. Her small hands, red and cracked from endless weeks of brutal forced labor, trembled as they gripped a filthy rag that had long since lost any capacity for cleaning. The dented tin bucket beside her contained murky water that reeked of caustic lye soap, its surface reflecting her gaunt, dirt-streaked face like a broken mirror. Silent tears carved clean paths through the accumulated filth on her hollow cheeks as she scrubbed mechanically at the same worn planks, her empty stomach cramping with relentless hunger that had become her only reliable companion. The meager breakfast of moldy bread crusts felt like a distant memory, and she knew evening would bring nothing more than greasy scraps scraped from her captor's plate if she managed to avoid another savage beating for some imagined transgression. Fresh welts from yesterday's leather strap crisscrossed her thin back like angry red marks, each movement sending waves of fire through her abused flesh. The monster's words still echoed relentlessly in her tormented mind. "Scrub harder, worthless creature, or tonight's punishment will make yesterday seem gentle. Nobody's coming for you, the whole world's forgotten you ever existed." Suddenly, the ancient floorboards vibrated with approaching hoofbeats, the rhythm growing stronger with each thunderous impact. Emma's head snapped up, her heart hammering against her ribs as a towering figure filled the doorframe. A cowboy shirtless against the brutal heat, his bronze chest gleaming with perspiration. Powerful muscles coiled beneath sun-darkened skin. A well-worn Colt revolver hung heavy at his hip, and when his steel-gray eyes locked onto hers across the squalid interior, she saw something that made her breath catch recognition, mixed with barely contained anger and an iron promise of retribution. 3 months earlier, Emma Grace had lived a simple but loving life with her parents on their struggling homestead outside Abilene, Kansas. Their modest 2-room house wasn't much to admire, but it had been filled with warmth, laughter, and unconditional love that made even their meager meals feel like feasts. Her father, Jacob, worked their stubborn patch of Kansas soil with calloused hands and unwavering determination, fighting against unpredictable weather that had destroyed 2 consecutive harvests. Her mother, Sarah, supplemented their failing income by taking in sewing from neighboring farms, her nimble fingers working late into the night by flickering lamplight. Despite their grinding poverty, the family faced their troubles united. Jacob would spin elaborate tales around their tiny fireplace, while Sarah hummed haunting folk melodies as she worked. Emma helped with age-appropriate chores, feeding their 3 scrawny chickens, gathering their sporadic eggs, and assisting her mother with the endless washing. The night that shattered their world forever, a well-dressed stranger appeared at their door, like a harbinger of catastrophe. The man was tall and lean, with oiled hair slicked back severely, a gold pocket watch chain glinting across his expensive vest as he spoke in smooth, cultured tones. He introduced himself as Mr. Ezra Carter, claiming to represent wealthy Eastern businessmen who provided opportunities for desperate farming families willing to relocate westward. Emma's parents spoke with him in urgent, hushed tones, while she feigned sleep, catching only fragments. Silver Mesa Ranch. Recently deceased cattle baron. Inheritance complications. Substantial compensation. Distant blood relative. Legal documentation required. What Emma couldn't have known was that Carter harbored a deep personal vendetta against the Hartwell family that went far beyond simple greed. Years earlier, he had worked as Silas Hartwell's business partner and ranch foreman, helping build the Silver Mesa empire through shrewd cattle deals. But Carter had grown resentful of Silas's success and had begun skimming profits and selling cattle without authorization. When Silas discovered the theft, he didn't just fire Carter. He publicly humiliated him, spreading word throughout the territory that Carter was a thief who couldn't be trusted. The scandal destroyed Carter's reputation and forced him into increasingly desperate criminal schemes, none of which yielded the fortune he felt the world owed him. When Carter learned through corrupt contacts that Silas had died and left everything to a distant relative, He saw his chance for the ultimate revenge, steal Silas's legacy, and destroy the last of the Hartwell bloodline. Her great-uncle Silas Hartwell had built his cattle empire through 4 decades of shrewd dealings and careful land acquisition. When he died suddenly of a heart attack, with no direct descendants, his will specified that his entire estate should pass to his nearest living blood relative, his deceased brother's granddaughter, Emma Grace. Carter's scheme was elegant in its calculated simplicity. Eliminate the parents who might search for their daughter or challenge his fraudulent claim. Keep Emma hidden and systematically broken until sufficient time passed for him to declare her legally dead. Then forge documents to claim the ranch as Silas's longtime business partner, selling the valuable land to railroad developers. The staged wagon accident that claimed Jacob and Sarah's lives 3 days later appeared to authorities as tragic frontier misfortune, a wheel breaking on a treacherous hillside, sending their wagon tumbling into a rocky ravine where it burst into flames. No one questioned why the charred bodies were unidentifiable or why little Emma Grace was never found among the wreckage. Carter transported Emma to his carefully chosen hideout, 60 miles from the nearest settlement, surrounded by endless grasslands, where winds would carry away any sound of her desperate cries. He forced her to scrub every surface from sunrise to sunset, feeding her barely enough to survive, while systematically breaking her spirit through daily beatings and psychological torture. "You're nothing now, worthless girl," he would tell her during methodical beatings with a heavy leather strap. "Your mama and papa are dead, and the whole world believes you died with them. Your precious Uncle Silas's empire should have been mine from the beginning, now it will be, and there ain't nothing left of his bloodline to stop me." Emma's only remaining connection to her former life was the small silver locket she wore around her neck, a simple pendant that had belonged to her beloved grandmother. Carter had examined it briefly during her first night, dismissing it as worthless sentiment, not worth confiscating. He had no idea that within its familiar weight lay the key to everything he'd murdered to obtain. The cabin door suddenly burst open with explosive force, and the cowboy stepped inside with deliberate movements that spoke of deadly competence. Dust swirled around his leather boots as his piercing gaze swept the squalid interior, taking in every detail with practiced efficiency. Carter spun from his position at a rickety wooden table, where he'd been counting bills and studying legal documents, his hand flying to the pistol holstered at his side. His usually composed features now showed visible cracks of genuine alarm. "Who the hell are you, stranger, and what's your business on my property?" Carter demanded, his voice pitched higher than normal. The cowboy advanced with controlled grace, his boots echoing ominously on the warped floorboards. When he spoke, his voice carried unmistakable authority and barely restrained violence. "Name's not your concern right now, Carter. What matters is you're holding something that belongs elsewhere." His eyes found Emma across the room. "Release the girl. She's not yours to keep." Carter's face twisted into an ugly snarl as his fingers closed around his weapon's grip. "Like hell she ain't mine. That girl's my legal ward, properly documented, and you're trespassing with criminal intent. Best turn around and ride away before this gets ugly." Emma's pulse hammered as she watched the two men circle each other like wolves preparing for battle. The cabin's atmosphere crackled with imminent violence. "I can see exactly how well you've been caring for your supposed ward," the cowboy said quietly, his gaze taking in Emma's skeletal frame, torn dress, and visible bruises. "Real generous guardian, treating an innocent child like your personal slave. What I do with my property ain't your concern, Drifter." Carter spat venomously. "She earns her keep same as anybody else. Besides, she's got Hartwell blood. That family owes me everything they ever had." The cowboy's eyes sharpened at this revelation. "You knew Silas Hartwell personally." Carter's laugh was bitter and full of old hatred. "Knew him. I helped build his empire from nothing, worked alongside him for years as his partner. Then the ungrateful bastard threw me out like garbage when he caught me taking what was rightfully mine. Well, now his precious niece can scrub floors until she dies, and his ranch will finally belong to someone who deserves it. But something about the cowboy's questioning struck Carter as unusual. The man's posture was too alert, his observations too keen. This wasn't some drifting saddle tramp. This was someone with training, someone who knew how to assess a situation like a lawman might. "You ask a lot of questions for a passing cowboy," Carter said, suspicion creeping into his voice. The cowboy's expression hardened. "Last chance, Carter. Let her go and maybe we can settle this without bloodshed." Carter's answer came in the form of gunfire. His hasty shot splintered the doorframe inches from the cowboy's head, sending wooden fragments flying while the ear-splitting report echoed off the walls. Emma shrieked and dove behind her water bucket as chaos erupted around her. The bucket tipped over, sending dirty water splashing across the floor. The cowboy moved with lethal precision, rolling behind a wooden crate as Carter's second shot punched through the wall. Chunks of plaster rained down as the cowboy returned fire, his Colt barking twice in rapid succession. One bullet shattered Carter's whiskey bottle in a spray of amber liquid and glittering glass splashing across his money and papers. The second round buried itself in the wall beside Carter's head, close enough to singe his beard. A heavy ceramic pitcher exploded from a ricocheting bullet, sending sharp fragments toward Emma's hiding place. She pressed herself lower as pottery shards scattered around her, one piece slicing a shallow cut across her arm. The old wooden table suddenly groaned and collapsed under the stress of the gunfight, its heavy planks crashing down and creating a temporary barrier. Carter scrambled behind the wreckage while the cowboy reloaded, but a stray board bounced toward Emma with dangerous force. "Emma, roll left," the cowboy shouted over the chaos. She obeyed instantly, the heavy plank crashing where she'd been crouched seconds before. "Now you picked the wrong fight, boy," Carter bellowed, abandoning his pistol for a broken chair leg, hefting it like a club as debris filled the air. Carter charged forward with surprising speed, swinging the makeshift weapon at the cowboy's skull. The vicious attack caught the younger man off guard, forcing him to focus entirely on survival. The cowboy caught Carter's wrist, mid-swing muscles bulging, as he stopped the deadly arc inches from his temple. The two men strained against each other before the cowboy's devastating counterpunch landed against Carter's shoulder. The impact sent Carter staggering backward with a howl of pain, his weapon clattering across the floor. But Carter was far from finished. "Emma," the cowboy shouted, "stay down and keep covered. Don't move until I signal." Carter grabbed his Winchester rifle, working the mechanism despite his wounded shoulder. The brass cartridge caught sunlight as it ejected, spinning through the gun's smoke-filled air. The cowboy dove sideways as the Winchester roared, feeling the bullet's heat as it gouged a furrow in the floor. Wood splinters peppered his back as he rolled behind furniture, rapidly assessing their deteriorating situation. Before either man could gain advantage, the cabin door burst open again. Two men wearing tarnished deputy badges stormed inside with weapons drawn, their faces hard with predatory intent. These weren't real peace officers. Emma could see that in their cold eyes and aggressive movements. They were Carter's hired criminals, corrupt badges purchased to legitimize their violence. "Kill him now," Carter screamed from behind overturned furniture. "Don't let him take the girl. Everything depends on keeping her here." But as the false deputy on the left raised his weapon, the cowboy caught something in the man's eyes, a brief, almost imperceptible shake of the head. Recognition hit him. This was Deputy Marshal Tom Harrison, working undercover. Emma's terrified scream pierced the gun smoke as the remaining genuine criminal opened fire. His bullets chewing up walls and furniture, filling the cabin with deadly splinters and choking dust. The cowboy returned fire while grabbing Emma's wrist, hauling her toward the door through the chaos. "Come on, we're getting out of here." They burst through the doorway into blazing afternoon heat, Emma's bare feet burning on the superheated ground as she struggled to keep pace with the cowboy's urgent strides. Behind them, Carter's enraged curses mixed with continued gunfire as the criminals gave chase. The terrain ahead was treacherous, rolling hills, covered with loose shale, interspersed with patches of thorny mesquite bushes. The nearest substantial cover lay 80 yards across this challenging landscape, a dilapidated corral with weathered fence posts. They ran in a zigzag pattern while bullets whined past their heads, each shot kicking up spurts of dust and loose rock. Emma's lungs burned with unaccustomed effort, her weakened body pushed beyond its limits by pure desperation. As they climbed a steep section of hillside, the loose shale betrayed them. Emma's foot slipped on the treacherous surface, sending her sliding toward a small ravine with jagged rocks at the bottom. The cowboy spun and caught her wrist just as she was about to fall. "I've got you," he said firmly, hauling her back to safety. "Stay close and watch your footing." The delay allowed their pursuers to close distance significantly. Carter appeared at the cabin doorway, with his reloaded Winchester taking careful aim. His marksmanship skills were considerable, and the current range was well within his weapon's capabilities. "Stop running like cowards," Carter bellowed. "You can't escape what's coming." The rifle's report cracked across the grasslands, the heavy bullet striking shale near their feet, with enough force to shower them with stinging fragments. Carter was systematically adjusting his aim with each shot. They reached the corral's dubious shelter just as Carter's men spread out in a flanking maneuver. The cowboy tackled the genuine criminal with bone-jarring force, sending both crashing into the weathered fence in a violent tangle that sent ravens exploding from their perches. The brief scuffle provided precious moments of respite, but Emma could see Carter methodically reloading with calm efficiency. The man was a predator in his element, comfortable with violence and confident in eventual victory. "We don't have long before they regroup," the cowboy muttered, checking his remaining ammunition while watching for their enemy's next move. His sharp eyes suddenly focused on the small silver locket around Emma's neck. That pendant. It looks heavier than regular jewelry should be. Emma's hand flew to her throat, fingers closing protectively around the familiar weight. "My parents gave it to me the very last night I saw them alive. Mama made me swear to keep it safe, no matter what happened to our family." Something in the cowboy's weathered face sharpened with sudden interest. They knew something dangerous was coming, didn't they? They were trying to protect you from something specific. Emma nodded as painful memories surfaced. "Papa kept looking out our window that last evening, watching for someone he feared might come. Mama was packing our few valuables in terrible hurry, whispering about legal papers and inheritance troubles, about someone evil who wanted to hurt our family for money. They made me swear never to let anybody take the locket away." "Can you tell me more about what they were whispering?" the cowboy asked gently. "Did they mention any names or specific details?" Emma closed her eyes, trying to remember through trauma and fear. "Mama said something about Uncle Silas's old partner and how he'd been asking questions around town about our family. Papa was worried because this man knew things about Uncle Silas's will that he shouldn't have known. They kept saying I was in danger because of something I inherited that I didn't even know about." The cowboy's expression grew grim as Emma's words confirmed his growing suspicions about Carter's true motives. "May I examine the locket carefully? I have a feeling your parents were smarter than Carter realized." With trembling fingers, Emma worked the delicate silver clasp while bullets continued to fly around their shelter. The locket opened with a soft click to reveal not a photograph, but a tightly folded piece of aged parchment sealed with crimson wax bearing an ornate cattle ranch crest. The cowboy's eyes widened as he recognized the distinctive seal, a fierce longhorn bull's head surrounded by 5 pointed stars. "Silver Mesa Ranch," he breathed. "Sweet Mother of God, Emma. This is an official inheritance deed." Emma stared at him in confusion. "I don't understand what that means." The cowboy carefully unfolded the precious document and read the formal legal language. "It means you're the rightful owner of one of the richest cattle empires in all of Texas, child. 31,000 acres of prime grazing land, thousands of head of premium cattle, a magnificent main house, and mineral rights worth a fortune." But that's not all. He continued, his voice growing harder. Now I understand Carter's real motivation. He's not just some random criminal, he's Silas Hartwell's former business partner, seeking revenge for being cast out in shame. He wants to destroy your uncle's legacy by stealing it. The stunning revelation hit Emma like a physical blow. But my parents were struggling farmers. How could I possibly own a ranch? Your great-uncle Silas, your father's uncle who you probably never met, died 6 months ago without children of his own. According to this document, everything goes to his nearest living blood relative. The cowboy's expression grew dark as the full scope of Carter's crimes became clear. That's you, Emma. And Carter knew it when he murdered your parents. Emma's world tilted as the pieces fell into place with horrible clarity. He didn't kidnap me just for slave labor. He murdered your parents specifically to steal your inheritance and get revenge on Silas Hartwell's memory. The cowboy confirmed grimly. Once you were declared dead in that staged accident, he could forge his own claim based on his former partnership with Silas and sell your land for enormous profit. Every day you've spent scrubbing his floors, every beating you've endured, it was all calculated to break your spirit so you'd never fight back. As this conversation continued, Emma found herself remembering fragments of that final night with heartbreaking clarity. She could see her father's worried face as he paced by the window, hear her mother's urgent whispers as she sewed the deed into the locket's secret compartment with trembling hands. Mama said this would prove who I really am someday. She whispered, tears streaming down her face. She said if anything happened to them, I should find someone good to help me claim what Uncle Silas wanted me to have. Silas was a very private man in his later years. The cowboy explained gently. After Carter betrayed his trust, he became suspicious of everyone and rarely left his ranch. But he never forgot his family, and he made sure his will would protect his brother's granddaughter, even if he never got to meet her. The casual cruelty of Carter's treatment took on new, more sinister dimensions as Emma realized that every second of her suffering had been part of a larger scheme fueled by personal hatred as much as greed. Her parents hadn't abandoned her, they died trying to protect her inheritance from a man bent on destroying everything Silas Hartwell had built. We have to get this deed to the proper authorities, the cowboy said with fierce determination. It's the only proof of what really happened to your family, the only way to ensure Carter pays for his crimes. But even as he spoke, Carter's voice boomed across the grasslands with renewed confidence and murderous intent. Time's up, cowboy. Carter bellowed from his position near the cabin. Send out the girl or we'll come in shooting. That ranch was mine by right, long before that sanctimonious old fool Silas died. The wind had picked up across the plains, stirring dust devils that provided fleeting cover from their enemies' increasingly accurate aim. The cowboy peered over the fence rail, counting their adversaries' positions and calculating tactical angles. Carter had positioned himself near the cabin with an excellent line of fire, while his remaining hired killer had flanked them from the opposite side. Their situation was becoming desperate. They were surrounded, outgunned, and running low on ammunition, with nowhere to retreat. Can you run on that injured knee? The cowboy asked Emma, noting fresh blood seeping through her torn dress from cuts sustained during their escape. Before she could answer, Carter materialized through the swirling dust, having circled around while they were distracted. His iron grip was inescapable as he seized Emma's thin arm, dragging her toward the corral's center where he could use fence posts for cover, while keeping her as a human shield. Let her go, the cowboy roared. Carter pressed his cocked pistol against Emma's temple, the cold metal making her whimper. Drop your gun, or I'll paint this dirt with her brains. You've got 3 seconds. But then something unexpected happened. The undercover Deputy Harrison suddenly stepped forward with his weapon trained on Carter instead of the cowboy. I can't let you do this, Carter. Killing children wasn't part of our agreement. Carter's eyes widened with sudden suspicion. What the hell are you talking about? Harrison, shoot the cowboy. I'm afraid I can't do that. Harrison replied calmly, revealing his true federal badge. Deputy Marshal Tom Harrison, and you're under arrest. Carter's face went purple with rage as he realized he'd been betrayed. You lying snake. He spun his gun toward Harrison, but the cowboy was ready. In that split second, when Carter's attention was diverted, the cowboy lunged forward and tackled him, sending Emma rolling away to safety. But Carter managed to fire a shot that went wild, the bullet ricocheting off a fence post and nearly striking Emma as she scrambled for cover. Emma there, the cowboy shouted, pointing to a small rock. Throw it at the third post to distract him. The 12-year-old grabbed the stone with both hands and hurled it with all her strength. It struck the wooden post with a loud crack, causing Carter to spin toward the noise, just as the cowboy delivered a devastating punch. But their situation remained precarious. They were still outnumbered, and Carter's remaining hired gun was taking aim from his flanking position. The cowboy needed to signal for backup, but how could he do it without revealing his position to the enemy? Then he remembered the emergency flare tucked in his saddlebag, a device federal marshals use to signal for assistance in remote areas. If he could get to his horse without being shot, he could create the signal that would bring help. Emma, I need you to be very brave, he said quietly. When I give the signal, you need to run toward that big boulder and stay hidden behind it. Can you do that? Emma nodded, fear and determination warring in her young face. Now, the cowboy shouted, and Emma darted toward the boulder while he provided covering fire and sprinted toward his horse. Carter's remaining man opened fire bullets, kicking up dust around the cowboy's feet as he ran. But he reached his horse, grabbed the flare from his saddlebag, and fired it high into the sky, where it burst in a brilliant red star. The agreed-upon signal for federal marshals to converge on his location. Dark storm clouds had been building on the western horizon, and now they began to unleash their fury with characteristic prairie violence. The first heavy raindrops struck like bullets, quickly escalating into a torrential downpour that transformed the landscape into a treacherous battlefield, where visibility dropped to mere yards. Lightning split the sky into blinding flashes, while thunder crashed overhead with bone-rattling force. The sudden noise and chaos spooked Carter's horse, sending it racing across the terrain in blind panic. Carter used the confusion to drag Emma through the chaos toward the rickety wooden footbridge that spanned the creek, now transformed by the storm into a raging torrent of muddy water and dangerous debris. The ancient structure swayed dangerously under their combined weight, its rotted supports groaning ominously. Perfect place for a tragic accident. Carter shouted over the howling wind and driving rain, his gun pressed against Emma's skull. Witnesses will testify that the scared little girl slipped and fell during the storm. A massive lightning bolt struck a dead tree 30 yards away, igniting it instantly in a blaze of orange flame that began spreading to dry grass despite the rain. The fire created additional danger as burning embers flew through the air, some landing on the wooden bridge and beginning to smolder. The bridge is catching fire. Emma cried out in terror, seeing flames beginning to lick at the ancient planks beneath their feet. The cowboy waded into the increasingly dangerous current, fighting against the powerful flow that tugged at his legs. The combination of rushing water below and growing flames above created a nightmarish scenario where every second counted. "It's over, Carter. You're completely surrounded," the cowboy shouted, though he had no idea if his signal had been received or if help was actually coming. "Never." Carter snarled back, his face twisted with madness. "I've worked too hard and killed too many people to give up my revenge against Silas Hartwell. His bloodline ends with this girl." The wind had grown so strong that it threatened to blow Emma right off the burning bridge. She clung desperately to the railing as gusts tried to tear her away, while Carter struggled to maintain his grip on both her and his weapon. In that moment of chaos, Emma remembered something her father had taught her during one of their rare hunting trips: how to use an attacker's momentum against them. As Carter fought to keep his balance against the wind, she suddenly went limp, causing him to lean forward off balance. "Now," she yelled. The cowboy didn't waste the opportunity Emma had created. He lunged forward through the knee-deep water, tackling Carter around the waist with bone-jarring force. The impact sent Carter's pistol spinning into the churning water below. They fought desperately on the burning, disintegrating bridge, Carter's superior weight and homicidal desperation against the cowboy's training experience and iron determination to protect the innocent child. Emma clung to the broken railing as the two men traded crushing blows, each strike accompanied by crashes of thunder while flames crept closer. Carter wrapped his thick fingers around the cowboy's throat, his face purple with exertion. "Should have minded your own business. Should have let me finish what Silas started when he ruined my life." The cowboy broke the strangling grip with a vicious elbow strike to Carter's ribs, feeling bone crack under the impact. "Silas was right to cast you out. You were nothing but a thief and murderer even then." The lightning illuminated their struggle in stark detail as the cowboy delivered a final powerful blow that sent Carter reeling backward toward the edge of the burning bridge. With flames spreading rapidly and the whole structure beginning to collapse, the cowboy grabbed Carter by the shirt and used his momentum to hurl him into the raging creek below. Carter's scream was cut short as he hit the churning water with a tremendous splash of the current seizing him immediately and carrying him downstream among the floating debris as he struggled futilely against the overwhelming force of the flood. The cowboy grabbed Emma just as the final section of bridge gave way, completely pulling her to safety on the muddy bank as the storm began to subside with characteristic prairie suddenness. In the distance, the sound of approaching hoofbeats could be heard, and through the lessening rain, his signal had worked. Federal marshals were converging on their location, drawn by the flare he'd managed to fire during the chaos. The rain stopped as abruptly as it had begun, leaving the vast grasslands steaming in the returning sunlight. Emma sat shivering in the mud, her wounded knee throbbing as the cowboy knelt beside her and gently examined her injuries. "It's finished," he said quietly, wrapping his leather vest around her thin shoulders. "Carter can't hurt you anymore." Emma looked toward the swollen creek where Carter had vanished. "Is he really gone?" "The current took him," the cowboy confirmed. "Even if he survived the fall, which is unlikely given his injuries, no man could fight that flood for long." But even as he spoke, one of the arriving marshals called out from downstream. "We found him. He's alive but barely conscious, pinned against a fallen log about a quarter-mile down." Emma felt a strange mixture of relief and disappointment. Part of her had wanted Carter to face justice in a courtroom, while another part wished he had simply disappeared forever. The inheritance deed, carefully protected in the cowboy's shirt pocket throughout their ordeal, remained dry and intact, despite the storm's fury. He retrieved it with infinite care, ensuring the wax seal and legal language were still clearly legible. "We need to get you to the nearest courthouse." He continued, helping her to her feet. "Get that knee treated, get you some decent food and clean clothes, and get this document officially filed so they can begin processing your inheritance claim." As they walked toward where the other marshals waited with the captured criminals, Emma found her voice again. "How long have you known exactly who I was?" The cowboy smiled warmly, for the first time since she'd met him. "Been searching specifically for you for nearly 2 months, Miss Emma Grace. Your case became a federal law enforcement priority when the inheritance lawyers reported the suspicious timing of your family's disappearance." He reached into his vest and withdrew a gleaming silver star, pinning it to his chest where it belonged. "Marshal Jake Boone, United States Federal Marshal Service." When we learned about Carter's history with Silas Hartwell, everything fell into place. Over the following 3 weeks, the full scope of Carter's criminal enterprise and personal vendetta was revealed through intensive interrogation. Carter survived his ordeal in the creek, though he suffered several broken ribs, a dislocated shoulder, and a severe concussion. His detailed confession was complete and damning. He admitted to murdering Jacob and Sarah Hartwell in cold blood, to kidnapping and systematically abusing their innocent daughter, to conspiracy to commit inheritance fraud on a massive scale. and to operating a criminal network that had targeted at least 15 other similar cases across 7 territories. Most shocking was his admission of the personal hatred that had driven his crimes. "I built that ranch as much as Silas did," he ranted during interrogation. "I found the best grazing land, I negotiated the cattle deals, I fought off rustlers and claim jumpers. Then he throws me out like garbage over a few missing steers. He ruined my life, destroyed my reputation, made me into an outcast. Well, I showed him I destroyed his precious bloodline, just like he destroyed mine." The confession provided prosecutors with everything they needed for multiple capital charges. 1 month later, Emma Gray stood in the impressive courthouse in Austin, Texas, watching Judge Morrison examine her inheritance deed with careful attention. The courtroom was packed with spectators, journalists, and legal officials who had come to witness this historic case. "By the authority vested in me by the state of Texas and the federal government," Judge Morrison declared in his resonant voice, "I hereby recognize Emma Grace Hartwell as the sole heir and rightful owner of Silver Mesa Ranch, including all lands, livestock, buildings, mineral rights, and financial assets, as specified in the last will and testament of Silas Hartwell, deceased." Emma could barely comprehend the magnitude of her transformed circumstances. The judge continued reading the detailed inventory: 31,000 acres of prime grazing land, over 4,000 head of premium cattle, a magnificent main house, with 28 rooms, extensive outbuildings, and liquid assets, totaling nearly $130,000, an astronomical fortune by any measure. Furthermore, Judge Morrison continued, "The court awards additional damages of $20,000 to be paid from the seized assets of Carter's criminal organization in compensation for the suffering inflicted upon the heir during her unlawful captivity." The judge's voice grew more solemn. "The court also notes that the defendant, Ezra Carter, has been sentenced to death by hanging for the murders of Jacob and Sarah Hartwell, with execution to be carried out within 30 days. His co-conspirators have received sentences ranging from 20 years to life in federal prison." Marshall Boone stood beside her throughout the proceedings, having requested extended leave to ensure Emma's successful transition to her new life. As they walked out of the courthouse together, she turned to thank him. "I don't know how I can ever repay you for saving my life and returning my inheritance." Boone adjusted his silver badge so it caught the afternoon light. "Seeing justice served and knowing you're safe is all the payment I need, Miss Emma. Your parents and your Uncle Silas would be incredibly proud of the brave young woman you've become." As they stood on the courthouse steps, Emma made several decisions that surprised even herself. "Marshall Boone, I want to use part of my inheritance to help other children who don't have families to protect them. Maybe build an orphanage where kids like me can be safe and learn important things. And I want to establish a scholarship fund in my parents' names for children who want to get an education. And," she continued, her voice growing stronger, "I want to restore Uncle Silas's reputation. Carter tried to destroy his legacy, but I'm going to make sure people remember him as the good man. He was not the lies Carter spread about him." Boone's smile was warmer than the Texas sunshine. "That's exactly what your family would have wanted you to do with your good fortune. They raised you to care about others and honor those who came before you. That's a legacy more valuable than all the land and cattle in the state." As the sun began to set over the Texas Capitol, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson, Emma prepared to travel to Silver Mesa Ranch for the first time. The nightmare was completely over. Carter would face execution within the month, and she had a future filled with possibilities her parents had died to secure. The Silver Mesa Ranch awaited her arrival, along with a capable staff who had maintained the property faithfully. There would be challenges ahead, learning to manage such a vast enterprise, receiving the education appropriate to her new station, and perhaps eventually finding someone worthy of sharing her considerable holdings. But they were challenges born of opportunity and hope rather than desperation and fear. Marshal Boone would accompany her to the ranch and remain until she was properly settled, ensuring her safety during this crucial transition. Justice had been served completely, her family's sacrifice had been honored, and Emma Grace was finally absolutely and forever free to build the meaningful life her parents had died to give her. 3 weeks later, the sound of hammering echoed across Silver Mesa Ranch as construction began on the first building of what would become the Hartwell Home for Children. Emma had insisted it be built on a hill overlooking the main house, where she could see it every day and remember why she had been given such incredible wealth and responsibility. Carter's execution had been carried out as scheduled, witnessed by Emma and Marshal Boone as a final act of closure. Emma had felt no joy in his death, only a profound sense that justice had finally been served, and that her parents could rest in peace, knowing their daughter was safe and their memory honored. The prairie wind carried away the last echoes of her captivity, as Emma Grace Hartwell looked toward a tomorrow filled with justice served, family honored, and a future bright with the promise of using her wealth to help other children who needed protection and hope, just as she had needed them during her darkest hours. She was home at last, surrounded by the legacy her Uncle Silas had built and her parents had died to preserve, ready to write the next chapter of the Hartwell story with compassion, courage, and an unshakable commitment to justice.